Welcome to the 2024 Grad Futures Forum. This is our Graduate Student Professional Development Conference hosted here by the Graduate School at Princeton University. My name is James Van Wyk, and I'm an Assistant Dean for Professional Development in the Grad Futures team. Thank you for joining us for the fifth year of this annual conference designed to support graduate futures at Princeton and beyond. As in the first four iterations of this conference, this year we've opened up again the forum to the broader graduate community. This year's theme is building clarity, confidence, and connections. And I know this next section will focus on each of these important areas with a special emphasis on clarity. Welcome to this session on academic writing, focused on how academics can write better and why we must. First, a few quick housekeeping items. Please note that this talk will be recorded, and we will be making use of both the poll feature and the Q&A function. I think you'll quickly see that though this is a webinar, this is going to be an interactive and generative session. I'm honored today to introduce today's speakers. Leonard Cassuto, author of many books, including the forthcoming Academic Writing as If Readers Matter from Princeton University Press, teaches American literature at Fordham University and writes about subjects ranging from crime fiction to the scientific search for room temperature semiconductors. He also writes a column for the Chronicle of Higher Education called The Graduate Advisor. Shyam Sharma is a scholar and teacher of writing and rhetoric who studies academic writing and communication at the intersection of the arts and sciences. His books include Writing Support for International Graduate Students, Rethinking Education Across Borders, and Making Learning Happen. He has written about how U.S. universities are facilitating the academic transition and success of international graduate students. He is also an expert on higher education issues about Nepal and South Asia. I'm going to drop two links into the chat to their individual websites so you can learn more about the exceptional biographies and accomplishments of our two featured speakers today. Towards the end of the session, we'll have a chance for Q&A, which I'm going to be helping to moderate, and then I'll close the session by inviting you to some of the remaining events in this year's Grad Futures Forum. Welcome, Lenny and Sam.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James. So we get started then. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for your time. From around the world, we can't see you yet, we can't hear you yet, but as along the way, we will be engaging you in ways that this technology allows. Let me start by sharing our screen, and Professor Cassuto, please chime in. The title of this discussion presentation is Academic Writing for the World. We would like to start with a brief framing that I would like Professor Cassuto to provide us for the conversation.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. Sam, I was very excited to join this panel because writing for the world is just such a nifty formulation. The key word, it seems to me, is world here, because and this is something I think that that scholarly writers don't attend to in all of the ways that they might. When we say writing for the world, we have to think, who is the world here? It's unrealistic to say, okay, I'm going to write something for the entire world. It's not possible in any reasonable way to communicate with everybody in the world. And we in any case, we're not trying to do that. Who are we trying to communicate with is a question that any writer needs to ask himself, herself, themselves when they begin. And this idea, who is the world? Well, if you're writing a diary, then your world is yourself. And you only need to please yourself, and your job is quite easy. You do whatever it is that you want. It gets a little bit more complicated when you are thinking about a world that is beyond yourself. But who is that world, and how are you going to reach it? The three questions to me that guide our time together today is, who is this for? What is it that we're doing for this world we're designing, and why should we do it? over the course of the hour, I hope that we will interactively with you get a chance to explore all of those questions.
Thank you. Following up, building on that, the idea of who is the world and how do you engage it, we have a quick interactive poll for you all to start thinking about and generating your own thoughts. I'd like to ask one of our hosts to pull up the poll so that our colleagues can our audience can take a minute or two to respond. They're very easy, quick questions. The poll is up. Please take your time. The first few questions are single choice. They ask you what languages you speak, as in being able to summarize an article you just published, what language you write in, what languages you have published in, that may be fewer, and what languages you have engaged or shared your scholarship in, and finally, what genres and stakeholders you have engaged through your scholarship. Take about one more minute.
Part of what we're doing here is we're asking you to think of yourselves as a writer in the act of writing. That is to say, we're asking you to conceive of who your world is when you write for the world. Part of designing your world, it also comes back to some of the smaller worlds that, for example, graduate students always have to address. When you write a paper for a seminar, you are writing primarily for an audience of one, your teacher. But if that paper is going to take off, if it has a chance to be published, then you're thinking more broadly, okay, maybe I'm going to publish this as a journal article. And if I do that, which journal? Who reads it? How might I reach them? All of these are questions that that can and should surface during your process.
Yeah.
And if you allow them to, then the results will be more concrete and better for you.
In a few more seconds, colleagues, please close the poll, and we will continue the conversation with chat and later on questions and answers. Okay, thank you. If the Zoom allows you to share the poll, this is wonderful. Let me highlight a few items here. Language-wise, there are people that speak more than 5 languages. There are colleagues, scholars speaking 4, 3, 2 languages. In fact, 29% speak 2, 24% speak 3, and a 7%, an impressive 7% speak 5 or more. Same with, it drops a little bit in writing, but again, people have been sharing their scholarship in many languages, published and shared their scholarship in multiple languages. This is very impressive. Sometimes it's a matter of realizing all of the resources and tools at our disposal that we already have. It's a matter of mobilizing a second or a third. And we see similar diversity in scholarship, genres and modes of scholarship. This is extremely impressive. You all are able to see the result if you scroll down. And same thing with stakeholders. You seem to be engaging a variety of stakeholders. You are in the right company today. Thank you. And now, I would like to encourage you to continue to think in this direction and share how you engage the world with your writing, with your scholarship in the chat box, or if you only see the Q&A, feel free to do that. We will build on your thoughts and ideas along the way. And now, I'd like to ask Professor Cassuto again to unpack further the idea of writing for the world, adding new thoughts and perspectives for our conversation.
Okay, so there's a why to this. That is, we've been talking a little bit about, or I've been talking a little bit about, shall we say, how to construct the task to fit the purpose. But what is the purpose? What should the purpose be? Now, that purpose is, well, let's not overlook some of the most important ones. That if you're in graduate school right now, and I know that most of our audience is bound to be, if you're in graduate school, it's not only a legitimate, but also an honorable goal to want to excel in graduate school, to do the best job you can. And in this case, of course, as I said, the audience that you need to persuade, impress, make an impression on is the teacher or teachers who are reading your work. And of course, that's fine. It's more than fine. It's something that you signed up to do, and you should learn to do it as well as you can, partly by thinking about the audience as a person or people whom you are writing to. But there's a larger why. Why did you go to graduate school? I think that you probably have some idea there. And the answer to that question is presumably something more than to get a job, although again, getting a job is an important outcome. If you want to go to graduate school in order to learn something and communicate it, then we need to think about, well, not only the how and not only the what, but also the why. Because if you think about why we communicate, it will affect how you communicate. A lot of academic inquiry, as I think you know, is in what people call silos. That is, it's specialists who are talking to each other very narrowly about the interests that they share and which they're passionately dedicated to. I do not in any way want to suggest that activity should stop. Specialists should speak to other specialists. They need to speak to other specialists in order to advance knowledge within the discipline. But what is the best way to do that, and how can the discipline thrive? And disciplines thrive and conversations thrive if they face outward, that they can speak within themselves, but they need to face outward. William Germano, who has written some very good books about how to write books, has talked about what he calls the snow globe book. Now, you've probably held snow globes in your hand at one point or another. There are those plastic scenes that are filled with liquid and imitation snow. You shake them up, and the snow scatters, and everybody oohs and ahs a little bit. So Germano has compared some academic books to snow globes because they are displays, but you can't actually reach them. They have walls. You can't get inside. So they are elegant displays of learning that only appear to start conversations but don't. In fact, they close them off because the writer is in essence too concerned about being proved wrong to actually try to reach out to an audience to assert an argument that can be contested or discussed. As a writer, you want to avoid that snow globe pose, because if our goal is conversation, if our goal is to learn something and communicate it, then snow globes only pretend to do that. Now, let me go wider and say that as participants in the academic enterprise, we are participating in public work. That is, scholarly writing, although it may be designed and communicate most effectively to specialists, is fundamentally public work. It aims to affect something that's going on in a public. So how can as writers, how can we acknowledge that fact and how can we honor it? And here is one way to put this, that we are in a caretaking business. We're trying to take care of the people who read our work so that they can engage with it and be persuaded by it. In turn, larger publics take care of us as writers. They give us the means and the space to write. So if we acknowledge writing as as an act within a circuit of mutual caretaking, then perhaps we can write differently, perhaps we can write better. There are ways to think about this, and I want to offer one concrete way, that as you think about the audience of specialists who may be the target of the next thing that you write, or maybe something that you're writing now, think about how you might make your work understandable to the people in the field next door to yours. You don't have to write for the New Yorker, you don't have to write for the New York Times. But if you're a sociologist, how might you make yourself understandable to anthropologists? That's the operating question here. If you are able to reckon with that question in your writing, what I want to suggest is that if you are that sociologist, your writing will be more understandable to your fellow sociologists because you made that effort to be understandable to anthropologists. This is part of how we can think about writing for the world and think about the world in various concrete ways that can allow us to do better writing. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. That gives us a few more perspectives and even some strategies. I'd like to build on that, as well as some of the strategies and ideas that we included in the interactive poll that you saw and maybe have started thinking about. And I'd like to share a few thoughts and experiences before we engage you again in discussions and chat. So gathered here are virtually our scholars from around the world and across the disciplines, and we all can engage the world very differently. So what we are presenting here are some thoughts and ideas and possibilities rather than this is how to do it. And what is possible depends greatly in our context, disciplines, the stage of our career, the privilege that we have, the languages, the genres that we have at our disposal. So please be mindful of that. Diversity, variety, possibility are very, very different for all of us. And these are not, set advice, piece of advice. But the idea is that each of us has tremendous amount of power and privilege in the form of knowledge and skills, status and recognition, trust and opportunity in front of us to have a PhD, a status as a scholar, teacher, writer, is a big responsibility in the world. And it's a great opportunity in the world. But if we mobilize the opportunities, the resources for greater social impact, for greater global good. Now, I don't want to go into the scholarship of public scholarship, but rather I would like to share, to keep this more accessible and concrete, but share some of the experiences that I have had. I want to also tell you my story, just to highlight how it is possible for someone who comes from a very, very humble background like me to also join, participate, and contribute a little bit to the bigger world and beyond just the discipline, just the specialty. I was born in the western hinterlands of Nepal, a tiny country between China and India, before my parents moved to another hinterland of far eastern India to escape poverty in Nepal. I went to a Catholic private school and then to public schools in India before returning to Nepal, my home country. It was out of dumb luck because a war broke among the tribals in India and tribal communities in India, and I had to come back home. I got to go to college where I could study something that I liked. At first, English language, literature, and then writing, rhetoric, communication. I taught at an elementary school to pay for college when I was 18, 19, which is what it really inspired me to pursue higher education. So I went to the capital city, Kathmandu, for a degree in English language, linguistics, literature. It was then that I learned that there was such a thing as research and scholarship, beyond merely teaching students what is in the book, merely teaching how to read, only teaching how to read and write. There was this big world of studying and researching and helping the world understand issues and solve problems, that there are many disciplines through which we could make an impact in the world. And I came to the US after a few years of teaching in Nepal to pursue my doctoral degree in writing and rhetoric, which again, I learned could help me to help thousands of people around the world to publish new research and scholarship, thereby sharing their knowledge to help their societies understand issues and solve problems, create opportunities, and grow the economy, treat the sick, heal the environment. I could not believe that I could do that if I looked at the possibilities beyond what was immediately in front of me. In other words, I, the humble farmer's child from the hinterlands of Nepal, have trained or helped hundreds, maybe thousands by now, of scholars around the world to do reading and to writing, research, and publication. As a training director of the Society of Transnational Academic Researchers, STAR, an organization with 15,000 plus scholar members around the world, I have developed and I run, along with other colleagues from around the world, a training program focusing on public scholarship, a social impact training of trainers. In just the past few years, we have trained 150 scholars from nearly 40 countries, and they have gone on to create social impact scholar training programs in their local communities, institutions, and regions. And they have gone on to train many more scholars each. These are just two examples of why I believe that we as scholars have tremendous power, privilege, resource to make a difference in the world. I share my story because I, a writing teacher, whose primary task is to teach writing and a little bit of research skills to students in college, realized that this same knowledge set of skills can be applied to a broader community, not only for me to communicate with the larger public, but also to help other scholars to communicate with the larger public, whether they are scientists, economists, or humanities scholars, which is to say that we all have unique opportunities for broadening the scope of the conversation of the impact. My point is this, in sharing my story: we can make an impact in the world, be our bigger, broader selves as scholars, if we overcome a few myths about writing and publication, research and scholarship. Writing may be creative, and it is very deeply personal, but it doesn't need to be a selfish pursuit of merely expressing ourselves. While expressing ourselves, we can also do a lot more if we think about and redefine who that world is, who our audience is, how big, how broad, how diverse it is. Publication doesn't need to be just one genre, the journal article or the book or something else. It could be multiple genres. It may be a matter of looking at these possibilities in relation to your audience, your context, your purpose. You could envision a broader a set of stakeholders. It can be as broad as our life's mission, our life's passion. Research and scholarship doesn't need to be only for our respective disciplines and specializations. It can and should be translated into many forms, shared in many mediums and platforms, applied in many contexts, as many as our hearts are open, as deep as our concern for the world and environment are real. When we leverage all the languages we can, including through reading and writing, through translation, in diverse styles and vernaculars, even accents and tones of our communities, we can create more access to our work, and we can make greater impact on the world. When we mobilize diverse genres, we don't necessarily take away from our next academic scholarship piece, journal article, or book. We actually expand the scope of our inquiry, deepen our questions and understanding, and the opportunities to be recognized by those for whom we wanted to pursue scholarship in the first place. And when we engage diverse stakeholders, we leverage our impact in ways that benefit us in return, creating a positive cycle of benefit, as Professor Cassuto indicated earlier. So for the graduate students in this community, I'd like to highlight a few things. For example, first, identify and engage your stakeholders by making a list of what these different groups of people are, who you would like to reach to, and why. This effort of reaching out or maybe collaborating with can make your research agenda grounded in a broader, deeper, more purposeful social mission. That may seem to take away your time and energy a little bit in the beginning, but you'll realize that it'll give you back more than it takes away from you. Second, mobilize your languages or modes of communication or genres, because this is a way to make us, help us make knowledge accessible. And the more accessible your knowledge becomes, the more value you will find in this. Here, I would like to mention an article that Professor Cassuto wrote about the Star Scholars Network training that we did 2 years ago, in which he made a brilliant argument that had not occurred to me until I read his article, which is a lot of minority students and scholars from marginalized communities don't feel a sense of passion and connection, a sense of purpose and belongingness to some of the abstract intellectual missions of their field. But when given these more tangible community-based, society-based challenges that they are facing or their communities are facing, they feel more motivated to do something about it. So scholarship becomes a means to something bigger, greater. And I was really inspired by that article. And since then, we have built the idea of a socially driven, socially impactful research into the research training program at Star Scholars. And finally, go beyond talking to each other and ignoring and be ignored by the larger society and the world. You can do that if you begin to connect transnationally or cross-culturally or transdisciplinarily, like Professor Cassuto just said. Leverage your network by using some of these media and modes of communication, social and professional networking today, and that will pay back. Don't allocate too much of your time there. Allocate just a little bit of time, and you'll see that it'll pay back in ways that is more than the investment. And so to highlight finally, one or two more strategies. Add a local language abstract to your journal article. If you speak a different language, your community will appreciate it. They may not read the whole article, but your granny, your cousins, your community members will read the abstract. You can then take that and post it on social media or get the article translated. Nowadays, you can do that not perfectly, but with new technology. Share publications by sharing information and resources with groups that are fighting for a better society. Just ask this question: who could use this knowledge? As Nelson Mandela would say, that education is the most important weapon. Who could use this to fight a fight that is bigger, greater, more impactful than you could do it alone? Go do presentations for the local government, trade groups, or communities related to your research. This is a matter of reaching out through your personal, professional, or social networks. Where could you share your ideas in that 1 hour a year, or maybe 2? Write op-eds, because it's easier to write and publish them as your graduate students or emerging scholars, and you get credit for it too. In many universities, it turns out that actually value public scholarship tremendously. Do book talks when a book comes out. Give a talk when a journal article comes out. Connect with relevant bodies of government and non-government organizations. And if research for the sake of research could drive the traditional self-centered scholars passionate, research for the sake of the world can drive us even more passionate. We too can get passionate, not only because of the idea, but because of what the idea does in the world. Thank you. Back to Professor Cassuto.
So let me focus on what Sam just did. That first of all, thank you for the good words about the piece that I wrote. I'm glad you were inspired by it, because I wrote it because I was inspired by the work that you were doing. And that describes a conversation. That is, you were willing to share in writing the work that you were doing. Then I wrote about it, and you were in turn taken by what it is that I said. That sort of conversation is what happens both inside and outside of scholarly disciplines. Whether it's inside the discipline or outside the discipline isn't as important as the fact that this works best when it's a conversation and not a snow globe. That's the first thing. The second observation that I want to make, as I am in effect close reading your presentation here, is that you began with a story. That is, and in fact, your whole presentation was a story, but you began with the story, with your own personal story. The idea that you can't bring yourself into your writing is something of a mythology. Yes, there are conventions that govern disciplines, and sometimes those conventions mitigate or even militate against putting your I in there. And in that case, if you want to be able to communicate effectively within that community, leave yourself out. But most of the time, that rule is much less hard and fast than you may think it is. And doing something like what Sam just did, beginning with his own story, can be an effective thing for you to do. You don't have to tell your own story, but you can tell a story as part of the larger story. Because what Sam did over the course of his presentation was to tell a story. Beginning with his own experience, he told a story that communicates an argument. The argument is that you will be a better writer if you think about the diverse publics that your work may intersect with. And again, here I want to go back. Maybe you are a graduate student in economics, and you're diverse, and your publics simply aren't that diverse. Maybe you're working in a very mathematical branch, and you don't have that many different publics. It doesn't matter whether you are speaking to economists who are in a niche in your field, or whether, as in the example that Sam used, you're speaking to different countries around the world as part of a network that you built. The idea that you want to reach out as far as your work can legitimately reach is something that, when you are preparing the work, will make it better. Sam used a story to communicate that idea. In fact, all scholarly writing, all arguments are stories. They are stories of your encounter with material that allows you to shape it into an argument which you go on to make. You can be a better writer if you acknowledge the narrative structure of what it is that you're doing, in the same way that I'm trying to flag and highlight the narrative structure that underlay the short presentation that Sam just made. So part of writing for the world is not only figuring out who your world is and trying to design it as widely as it reasonably can be. You don't have to speak. I'm not aware that my writing speaks to Nepal, except indirectly if I get a reader like Sam who is taken with it and then communicates his version of it outside. That's very gratifying to me, but it doesn't mean that I started out that way. You want to think about your world in a way that you can understand it, and then design an act of communication to fit the purpose. And while you're doing that, understand that that act of communication is at the bottom a story. And if you acknowledge that story and you follow its narrative thread, your writing is going to be much stronger for it.
And then there is also a feedback loop in the way you seek to communicate. And the world, when it speaks back to you, you can relate your problems, research questions to the challenges in the world. You begin to see that there's something more you could do, something better you could do. Let me give you a quick example. In the Star Scholars program, we have been using this example of a urban design, urban planning engineer. Let's say in Kathmandu. Imagine that she notices that the traffic is extremely heavy and the city is chaotic. Let's say she studies traffic jams. She has options. One is to simply collect the data, crunch it, analyze it, and show the patterns for somebody to figure it out. That could also be a publication. I'm a mere scientist. I'm only a scientist. I don't do public policy, or I don't solve social problems, maybe what she might say. But if you were to look at the real problems, the problems may not be simply more cars, fewer cars, more motorcycles, bikes, pedestrian, but maybe why is the question. The moment you ask the question of why, scientifically, it is possible that there are more cars than the bikes and motorbikes in that city where most people, 80% of them, do not ride cars. But the 20% may be occupying most of the street and making life miserable for everybody. Now, if you were to take that angle and say, who, Why? How could this solve this problem, right? Then that becomes an interdisciplinary challenge. You may talk to someone else who can help you figure out that challenge. You may go to the city council and say, here's what I found. And here are two perspectives, one from me as the urban planning person, here's another one from your economics department. But that feedback loop from the other colleague in the next door, department, or the city council where the actual action might happen by virtue of your figuring out, that feedback loop can really shift your research agenda a little bit. It shouldn't shift overnight, right? Don't try to solve all of the world's problems while you're doing your PhD or within the next 2 years when you finish your PhD. But over the course of 5 to 7 years, if you have that mindset, if you turn in that direction, if you are interested to pay attention to the real world challenges, your research agenda could become so powerful and impactful. And you might write and publish more. You might contribute more. You may be recognized more. And that feedback loop is very interesting. The moment you use a different language, a whole new world opens. The moment you use a different genre, a whole new possibility opens up. The moment you talk to someone outside of your smaller circle or go to people that actually take action by using your kind of knowledge, you begin to see the value of your knowledge. And that feedback loop is powerful. Knowledge, inspiration, action, perspective, understanding, context, right? Interaction. It is that feedback loop that I was saying I learned to agitate. I learned to triggers to start even before I finished my PhD down in Kentucky while I was still a graduate student. And that feedback loop has been sort of one of the most powerful motivators, movers of my life. The feedback with the public.
Here's a tip as well. I'm listening to you and I'm struck by, there's another feedback loop that's going on here. It's a feedback loop between the abstract and the concrete. I'm going to, again, focus on the rhetoric of Sam's presentation. He started out a few minutes ago talking about the need to reach out in a global way. That's an abstraction. But then then he came back again with the example of a traffic study. That's a concrete example. Now, in any kind of effective writing, but particularly effective scholarly writing, the abstract and the concrete have to be in constant dialogue. They have to create a feedback loop. Because without the concrete, the abstract is a balloon that floats up into the clouds. Without the abstract to organize it, the concrete is just a collection of details, a pile of bricks. So as you write, look at what just happened. In order to be as persuasive as he understands he can be, Sam is alternating between the abstract and the concrete. In any kind of persuasive writing, if it is truly going to persuade, the abstract and the concrete have to be in dialogue in this way. And if you understand this as a writer, then you can do more than just intuitively apply it. You can look and see whether you're doing it, because if you're as you reread your writing, because you must in order to make it more effective, you can look and see, where am I being abstract? Is the concrete coming in soon enough? Am I being concrete for so long that my reader is getting lost in my example and forgetting the larger idea that it's supposed to illustrate? Be aware of the relationship between the abstract and the concrete, and your writing will get better for it.
So well put. The world is concrete, and it needs our abstract frameworks and tools to be able to make sense of its tangled, wicked problems. Without our support, it cannot figure out a lot of things, right? We show the big picture, the jungles, and we cannot just get lost in the trees and the leaves. But if we simply stay in our lane and never intersect with the world that is concrete, the abstraction will not be put to use. It will not guide and inspire and help people to solve the world's problems. More than ever, now we're facing social, political, environmental challenges, and the world needs us more than ever before.
And our enterprise needs us. The scholarly enterprise is, I think if you're in it, you know this, the scholarly enterprise is under threat in a way that is unprecedented in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
And the idea of giving some of your time to try to make your writing face outward. It's not just something that you're doing for an abstract reason. It helps to make the academic community more coherent, and to the extent that you can reach outside the academic community and show that larger public what it is that we do in here, then you help to preserve the community that you are part of, which is also in your interest, our interest, and all of it, and the larger society's interest.
And on that note, we'd like to give you a heuristic, a tool that you can take away, download. I'm going to share the screen for a moment and then share the document with you. This is basically a handout that you can download. Can someone, if I post it in the chat box, put it out there for everyone to see? Just copy and paste it for the public. Basically, let me show it while you receive the link. It is a worksheet, a handout where somebody volunteered to share their example. A scholar in Nepal uses these many languages, starting from the right. One language for data collection, because that's the community in which these collect the data. That community does not use English. Then the national language, Nepalese, for writing her op-eds or her scholarship. And then there is a different language, it turns out, in the family that where her knowledge also permeates. And there's another language in the bordering with India, Hindi. And so she seems to be collaborating with colleagues there in English. So of course, a few of us may have 5, but we probably have 2. And if nothing, we have one standardized English and one English of the community. Can we speak our scholarship in the language of our community, right? The day-to-day English. That itself may be a step in the right direction. Then she shared examples of the genres she mobilizes. We may not have 10 like these, we may have 2. And I'm suggesting that you try your hands at an op-ed or a workshop or a resource that you build for teaching, or a something in your leisure, in summer, in winter. And, you know, at first you may dabble in it a little bit, and then you may find that you like something and you can mobilize that tool in a more scholarly, more systematic way. And finally, she identified that these are the stakeholders. And look at this example and basically start thinking about what are yours, right? If not today, then maybe within a year, what are my tools, my community, my mediums and platforms, or even opportunities and platforms that you could go to. And we also have some reflection questions down here. Please use this heuristic as a way to ask us questions, but definitely you can go beyond that heuristic to ask us questions. Would like to save the last 15 minutes for a Q&A, a robust discussion with you.
Great, Lenny and Shyam, we have a few questions already in the chat. I really encourage everyone, please share your questions. The combined wisdom of these 2 authors, really, really astounding. And we want to make sure we get your question on the record and in the recording for others to learn from. So please ask the question that's burning for you. I'll start with a question from Matt, who asks, what's the biggest misunderstanding scholars have about academic writing and storytelling? Put another way, what's the most common issue that can be addressed by a simple change in mindset or practice? And what is that simple change? Great question, Matt.
So my reckoning on that question is that I start with the idea that scholars, when they're reading academic writing, they're typically reading it with an eye towards using it. That is to say, how can I incorporate what I'm reading into my research? How can I extract from it what I need in order to do my research better? And that's a use-driven reading. It is not particularly aesthetically sensitive, although you can, if something is beautifully written, that certainly will register. And at the same time, I see so many scholars imagining when we write our own stuff, oh, everybody's going to slow down and read that because it's beautiful. Yeah. So a misunderstanding there based on a misunderstanding of audience. There is nothing dishonorable about reading for use. In fact, it's honorable because you're reading other people's writing in order to try to create a contribution that you hope will do some kind of good. But if you want to be a writer who is going to be read, you have to acknowledge the idea that people are going to read you like that. How can you write your own stuff so that it is most friendly to somebody who is reading in this way? In the book that I've just finished, which is coming out in a few months, I compare the academic reader to a blue whale. A blue whale swims through the water, takes giant gulps of the water, and then forces the water out through a mesh of baleen in its mouth to capture the krill, the food, the crustaceans that are its food. So the whale is constantly taking big gulps of water and then straining the water to capture the krill. This is what academic readers do all day. They are reading large amounts of material in order to capture the parts of it that they want. And a big misunderstanding is in academic writing, too much academic writing is not written with that behavior in mind. If you want to help your academic reader, then construct your academic writing with that reader's behavior in mind. It doesn't mean that you're going to be just making lists. Not at all. You're going to be making arguments just like you were before. But the structure of those arguments, the structure of those presentations will keep the behavior of that reader in mind and do things like, for example, front load the main idea. Mystery stories don't do that, but academic writing is not a mystery story. Academic writing is the opposite of a mystery story. If you want to be read by somebody, then you show them what it is that you're doing so that they can see whether they need to focus and strain out what they need from what's coming. So that I think is the most important awareness that an academic writer needs.
And in addition to the awareness of who you're writing for, you can add that front loading, framing, a little flow, and some maybe metaphors, ways that readers can absorb, a broader audience may be able to absorb your writing. I would also say that there's this misconception that those who write for the public are a different set of people, that we can't do it. If you do it, then you're going to give up, lose something. I don't think it is true. As one of my mentors says, you should allocate just a little bit of time for something that really makes you mad, that drives you crazy. This needs to be done, right? Allocate your social media posts for that one thing and give it about 2 hours a month, right? Nobody's saying spend all of your reading and research and publication time on social media. In fact, I turn it off for about half a year because it's too distracting when I'm working on a book or something. But whenever you are there, maybe that's when you can really take that 2% of your time and talk about something that makes you feel passionate, or translate a little bit of what already exists and make it available for a larger audience, right? If you want value for your CV, find an intersection of the public and the scholarly where you can actually get credit for it. So don't create these binaries and don't run from the possibilities because you think you are either on this side or that side. It's not that way. It's always a spectrum and a very tangled scenario where if you're not smart, strategic, yes, you could actually spend a lot of time and lose your time and energy in running after the thing that makes you mad, right? And really not produce a scholarship to become recognized so that you can do more in the future. So you've got to be very strategic, but please don't create this binary. I don't have the time for this. No, how much time do I have? How do I mobilize that time? I can't do that. No, what can I do? What am I already doing, right? Or no, I cannot speak to that audience. This is my audience and I don't know how to. Well, it's a matter of taking the time and energy and strategy slowly over the course of 5 years. So with that heuristic rubric, whatever you call it, please make a 5-year plan and say in 5 years, I'm going to write an op-ed I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to, interview, for a TV. Reach out. There's no, there's no embarrassment in actually making your scholarship available for a larger public, right? If you see value, convey value. So oftentimes you need to be connected. You need to relay your information. You need to inspire people to reach out to you, because at some point you become, an extremely important expert that the world needs. At least a few people need, or your town council needs, or your community or your discipline needs. It's that a little bit of advocacy, a little bit of activism, combined with serious scholarship can really take you a long, long way.
That's really great. I think what I'm hearing in what you both said so far is intentional goal setting. So you can't write for the world. It's not possible, right? You have to write for a particular audience. But if you don't have concrete goals about how you're going to spend time doing that work, you will just defer that work until your desk is cleared, or so to speak. But setting concrete goals that are, delimited and accomplishable and realistic, SMART goals, as they're often called, might look something like, for week 1, look at other op-eds that have been published in sociology and find 5 models that you think are interesting for your own work. Week 2, you might spend an hour doing something like reaching out to folks who publish those op-eds and asking them for strategies. Week 3, so in other words, not doing it all at once, but spreading that work out over time.
So that mirroring, James, that mirroring shows us that what we've communicated, that's a validation that we've communicated accurately. Sophia has a question in the chat. When do you know when to stop revising? Well, one possible answer to that question is if you can give your work to a reader and they can mirror back to you accurately what you believe that you just said, then you know you did it. You know that you can stop revising. You can do tidying, but you no longer need to worry about whether you are getting the main idea across. It's about the communication with the reader. And so if you want to know whether you should stop revising, you need to go out to a sample reader or two and see if they can mirror back to you what you believe you just said.
Yeah. And there's another question from Deepak.
Yeah, well, before we pivot to that one, I think the one thing I would want to say to Sophia, the other thing I would say is share your work before you think it's ready to be shared. The number one flaw, I think, in graduate students and how they approach revision is that they revise way too much before sharing it with somebody who can mirror it back to you. So revise enough so that you can get it to a condition that you don't feel it's ready to be shared, but you actually have to share it before that point, because if you wait till you think it's ready to be shared, you'll never share it, and then you won't get that mirroring moment.
Yes, this goes back to the point that everything but a diary is public work. That every work of writing except a diary is public. And that the sooner you engage your public, the sooner you will be able to figure out how you're doing in the communication that you're seeking to engage in. It helps for writers to understand, first of all, that writing is collaborative, because it is. Open the acknowledgement, read the acknowledgements page of any book, and you get ample justification for that. It's not an equal collaboration, but it's a collaboration. So writing's collaborative, number one. And number two, get yourself a couple of collaborators you trust and work in tandem with them, that is, usually reciprocally.
I would also add to that if you are thinking about revising, don't look at revising as you're writing as a final product, but rather, for example, as a work in progress, which is go to a presentation and present a draft. I still call it a draft, or the final product of X. But take that X and turn it into an article. But then that article still has an opportunity to be turned into an op-ed, right? So that means you're taking these multiple genres and stacking them along the way in a process so that nothing is final. But if you don't publish something in 24 and something is 25 in terms of 26, you'll never get to the stage of refining your own idea, because it never got an opportunity to be public, given feedback by someone. You didn't get to think about it from different perspectives. It was not mirrored back. So use the mirror back idea in a conference, in a publication or a blog or a Facebook post. And then when that is mirrored back, you can improve it and take it to a next level with a new audience, new genre, new purpose. That is how you grow from, one genre, one language, one context, one audience. To answer this other question about AI, Deepak, I think you raise a very important question. The field of scholarship, especially from the global South, is becoming crowded with AI-based writing. This is driven by policies that universities demand that all their PhD students publish 2 articles before graduation in international journals in English. And now, if you are a non-English speaker and you don't have access to a lot of these discourses and communities, and you have to publish, in your desperation, of course, that's going to come out. It's already coming out. And then even working scholars beyond their PhD, some universities that have countries that have 50,000 scholars or 100,000 scholars say, all of you need to publish 2 articles each in English in international journals. That puts the pressure, and desperation leads to AI. We are already seeing this explosion of AI in that landscape. And the question Deepak is asking is, I think it's becoming crowded. But I would also take the question from the flip side and say, how could you actually mobilize artificial intelligence to do your own writing? One of the things that I've found is you could use it to brainstorm, but don't trust any fact, any reality that it makes up, because it's a make-up machine, right? It is designed to generate plausible sentences. And it doesn't know if in real world, real context, this is actually true. If you say, how is my cat doing today? Unless somebody went into ChatGPT and told it not to answer that question, it will answer that question. I think your cat is, because that's a plausible answer, right? What is my cat thinking today? There's an unknowable question, but if you ask ChatGPT, unless it is told not to answer that question, it'll answer it. If I asked one day, make me a list of 12 articles in astrophysics written by Shyam Sharma, a scientist in Stony Brook. And there's no Shyam Sharma scientist in Stony Brook who has written 12 astrophysics articles. It made a beautifully titled astrophysics article that I wrote. Now, that is the landscape. And, and in that landscape, be very, very, very careful. Don't trust it beyond what you can judge. The intersection of AI and use is AI can generate on a y-axis. You can judge on an x-axis, whatever it meets. You can use it to help you, but don't go beyond that and make the mistake that people are doing around the world in desperation.
So we've got some open questions, and I'm going to start with Karina, who asks, what are some ways that doctoral programs could help empower students to write in a plurality of voices? I'm going to throw that one to you, Lenny.
Lenny.
So that's a teaching question. It is and there are so many ways that doctoral teaching can be better. And I keep retreating to the idea, who are we doing this for? Because if we think about larger questions of why, those are always informing our work. But who are we doing this for? And thus, how shall we do it? It is a sad truth about doctoral education that it is historically designed for faculty, not for students. This is the historical fact. If you're wondering how this historical fact, which continues into the present, plays out today, if you're in the humanities, think about the seminar that you've been in, which has the invisible subtitle, My Next Book. That is the professor's next book. If you're a scientist, think about how your dissertation work in your lab has to be a subset of what your lab director, your advisor, your professor's funded lab work already is. So again, I return to that point that I made, that it's faculty centered. Doctoral education is faculty centered. We need for doctoral education to be student centered. This is a movement which is gaining strength, and I hope that it continues to. The larger answer to your question is that we need, if this is to happen, if we are to teach better and thus meet our students' writing needs more effectively, we need to conceive of graduate education as beginning with the needs of the student and not having the needs of the student be some kind of sidecar that just comes along.
And I would add, don't
So-
wait for the institution to change. You can change at a micro level by
Mhm.
writing and doing the thing that you think you should be moving the university toward. You are a small part of the university and an important one. Sometimes you can do it collaboratively. Sometimes you can put pressure on your department. Sometimes you may be able to organize or connect more broadly with your community. Oftentimes, scholars like us are inspired by our students to do the right thing. So don't see this as a one-way traffic, a trickle down. You can push in the right direction with a small action act at a time.
Absolutely. And what a fitting way to close out our hour together. I think the focus on what we can accomplish from the subject positions in which we find ourselves. We each have a responsibility to make academia better than when we first joined it. And I think we can't abdicate that responsibility, no matter if we're a graduate student, administrator, faculty. We're in this together as an ecosystem. And also the world needs the ideas that PhDs are creating. And we need to hear from the world as we're asking our research questions, as we're attempting to answer them. And then we need to figure out how to get the new knowledge we've created in the hands and in the heads of the people who need it. And those are not easy things to do. But this is a moment in which the technology does allow us to find our target audiences in ways that are pretty unprecedented. So with that, I'm going to ask everyone to thank our panelists today, Sam and Lenny. It's an honor to know you both and to watch your work progress. Please, if you are at an institution, make sure they have Lenny's book on their horizon for their library purchase. If you're at an institution that doesn't have Sam's book on teaching writing to international graduate students, please make sure they get it, and you can check it out and read it. One of the important things we can do as people who may feel sometimes disempowered is to share resources like the books and the articles that Sam and Lenny write about graduate education, about international graduate students as writers. Be resource sharers, be connectors. Thanks for your time today, Lenny and Sam. We're seeing some
Thank you.
congratulations. I hope you can both see those in the chat. And I'm going to just close us out by noting 3 upcoming events today at the Grad Futures Forum. At noon, we have a panel on science policy pathways. At 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a Zoom event using academic analytics data to understand the pathway to the professoriate. And at 4 p.m., for those of you in the Princeton area, we have the future of graduate education and the imperative of professional development, at which Emily Meller from the AAU, the American Association of Universities, will receive the 2024 Gratitude Award from the Office of the Dean of the Graduate School and Grad Futures. Last year's winner was Lenny Cassuto. So join us at noon, at 2:30, and then at 4 p.m. The forum continues tomorrow, Friday, April 12th. All of the events, if you're not able to make them live, all the events that are listed on the registration form are being recorded. We're putting together high quality recordings of the in-person events that we will circulate to you after the fact. So please share the Grad Futures Forum website with your networks. With that, thank you again, Lenny and Sam, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.